The emergency room at Mercy General never sleeps, and tonight neither will the man who just walked in wearing a dark suit and eyes that have already decided someone's fate. But first, the moment that changed everything. Annetta stands at the nurse's station, deep brown skin glowing under the harsh fluorescence like it belongs to sunlight instead. Natural hair pinned tight in that professional way that still lets a little wildness escape. She's charting, focused, the nurse everyone relies on without ever asking, the one who keeps this chaos from collapsing. She doesn't hear him approach. Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo, chief surgeon, hospital legend, the god complex in scrubs whose hands have snatched people back from death more times than anyone can count, strides across the floor like gravity bends for him. No one dares interrupt, no one ever has, until he stops dead behind her. A flicker crosses his face. Not surprise, not lust. Something darker, hungrier, like memory laced with ownership. Then he does the unforgivable. His hand snaps out, fists a thick handful of her hair, a brutal, entitled yank meant to force her eyes to his, and pulls hard. The entire ER freezes. Pens drop. Monitors beep louder in the silence. Annetta doesn't scream. She doesn't flinch. She just goes very, very still. In the shadowed corner of the trauma bay, behind thick glass, the man in the dark suit watches every second. His jaw locks. His fingers curl slowly around the armrest. He isn't a patient. He isn't staff. And the look in his eyes says he's about to make Dr. John regret ever touching her. Who is he? Why is he here? And what happens the second he stands up? Stay, because what explodes next isn't just drama. It's war. Welcome to Afro Career Stories by Yem Besties. Please like, share and subscribe. The pain is sharp and immediate, the kind that travels from the scalp straight down to the spine. Annetta's pen drops, her chart slips. For one terrible second, the entire ER holds its breath. She turns slowly. Not because she is afraid, because she is deciding. Jeon Kwan-soo stands there with the casual arrogance of a man who has never once been told no, handsome in the way that power makes men handsome, silver-streaked hair, a jaw that could cut glass, scrubs that probably cost more than her rent. He looks at her the way people look at furniture that's shifted out of place. "I need the chart on bed 7, he says. Just that. Like his hand wasn't just in her hair. Like she's a cabinet he knocked open. Annetta's throat tightens. The humiliation burns, slow and deep, the kind she recognizes, the kind black women in predominantly white spaces are expected to swallow and smile around. She has swallowed it before. She has smiled before. She picks up her pen. She finds the chart. She hands it over. But her eyes say something else entirely. In the trauma bay, the man in the dark suit watches her eyes. His name is Seung-jun. And in this city, his name is whispered in back rooms, in precinct hallways, in boardrooms where men sweat through expensive shirts when they say it. The Soulite, some call him. The others just call him Sir, and pray he never has reason to call them back. He came to Mercy General tonight because his lieutenant took 3 bullets doing work Seung-jun ordered. He came as a courtesy, a silent vigil. He is not a man who sits in waiting rooms. But tonight, he sat. And in sitting, he watched a quiet woman in blue scrubs hold herself together under the hands of a man who should have known better. Something moves in his chest. Something he has no language for, because Seung-jun has not felt anything in his chest for a very long time. He doesn't move. Not yet. The night continues. Annetta works. Triage, meds, comfort, crisis. She moves through the ER like someone who belongs everywhere and is claimed by nothing. Her laugh breaking out in the pediatric bay when a 7-year-old shows her a crayon drawing of his own bandaged hand. Her voice dropping low and certain when a panicked father needs to hear that his daughter's vitals are stable. She is good at this. Genuinely, bone-deep good. Seung-jun watches all of it. When his lieutenant is finally wheeled to a room, he should leave. He has 17 things to address before dawn. He has people waiting. He has a city to run in the shadows. He stays another 40 minutes. She doesn't notice him. Not really. She glances through the glass once, clocks the expensive suit, files him under family member high stress, leave alone, and moves on. He notices her noticing nothing. It does something strange to him. Most people flinch when he looks at them. She looked through him, like he was just another person in a room full of emergencies. He can't explain why that makes him want her to look again. It's past 2 in the morning when it happens. A shift supervisor appears beside Annetta at the station, voice low, expression careful in the way that means bad news, wearing a professional mask. Dr. Jeon filed an incident report, the supervisor says. He's claiming you were insubordinate, refused to provide patient documentation. Annetta's hand goes still on the keyboard. He pulled my hair, she says quietly. He says you misunderstood, that he tapped your shoulder. The word misunderstood lands in the room like a slap dressed as an apology. Annetta feels her pulse in her temples, feels the very precise shape of this trap closing around her, familiar and suffocating. The way institutions protect the men who built them. The way a nurse's word dissolves against a chief surgeon's signature. I have it on camera, Annetta says, still quiet. The whole station is monitored. The supervisor's eyes flicker, just briefly, with something that might be relief or might be regret. He's already spoken to administration. They're reviewing the footage, which means someone has already decided what the footage shows. In the hallway, halfway to the elevator, Seung-jun slows his steps. He heard. He doesn't go to the elevator. He stands in the corridor for a moment, perfectly still, while the machine in his mind, the one that has run a criminal empire for 11 years without a single catastrophic mistake, turns over what he just heard. They're reviewing the footage. He knows what that means. He has watched institutions bury evidence before. He has done it himself on occasion for people he owed. He knows exactly how it's done. A quiet conversation with the right administrator, a form misfiled, a timestamp that suddenly doesn't match. It's not even complicated. It's just the language of power, and power speaks it fluently. He pulls out his phone, dials a number that rings once. The hospital security system, he says. Mercy General. Pull the footage from the ER nurses station. Tonight. All of it. Back it up somewhere they can't touch. A pause. Yes. Now. He ends the call and walks to the elevator. In 3 weeks, Seung-jun will have reason to use that footage. He doesn't know that yet. He tells himself this is just reflex, a response to injustice from a man who operates outside the law but has somewhere in his architecture a line. He tells himself he would have done it for anyone. He almost believes it. The next morning arrives the way bad things always do. Ordinary, bright, birds probably singing somewhere while Annetta sits across from human resources and watches a woman named Dr. Patricia Cho explain with practiced sympathy that given the circumstances and in the interest of the patient care environment, Annetta is being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Annetta keeps her hands flat on her thighs, keeps her face careful. What exactly is being investigated? She asks. Dr. Jeon has submitted documentation suggesting a pattern of, "He pulled my hair." The words come out clean and final, stripped of anger, which makes them hit harder. In front of the entire nursing staff and 2 orderlies and whatever family members were in the waiting area, he grabbed my hair and yanked it because he wanted a chart. That is what happened. Dr. Cho's mouth tightens slightly. The security footage is... There are some questions about the angle. The angle. Annetta repeats the words very slowly. We understand this is upsetting. I would like a copy of any documentation filed against me. Annetta stands. In writing. Today. She walks out before they can watch her fall apart. She makes it to the parking garage before the shaking starts. Not tears, not yet, just the body's response to sustained, controlled rage. Her hands trembling against her car keys, her breath coming too fast and too shallow. She knows this feeling. She has survived it before. But knowing a thing doesn't make it lighter. Her phone buzzes. She glances at it. Unknown number. She ignores it. It buzzes again. And again. On the 4th call, something makes her answer. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the irrational need for any voice that isn't her own. Ms. Annetta. The voice is male, low, with an accent she can't immediately place. Korean, but calibrated, like someone who has spent years in international rooms. My name is not important yet, but I have something that belongs to you. She nearly hangs up. 47 seconds of footage, the voice continues, showing exactly what Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo did to your hair, your chart and your dignity, backed up to 3 separate servers the hospital cannot access. Silence. Who are you? She asks. Someone who was in the waiting room last night. Her mind snaps to the image, the man in the dark suit, the one she glanced at through the glass and filed under leave alone. She remembers the quality of his stillness, the kind of stillness that isn't peace. What do you want? She asks. Because nobody gives something away in this world. The pause that follows is thoughtful, like he's considering the most honest answer. Nothing, he says finally. Not from you. Then why? Because what happened to you was wrong, and the people trying to bury it are making a mistake. Another pause, quieter. I don't like it when people make that kind of mistake. Something in his voice makes the hair on her arms rise. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The understanding that this man does not make idle statements. If I need the footage, she says carefully. How do I reach you? You won't need to. I'll know when you need it. He ends the call. Annetta stares at her phone for a long moment. Then she does something that surprises her. She laughs. Short and sharp and slightly disbelieving. Because that was either the strangest act of charity she has ever received, or the opening move in something she doesn't fully understand yet. Either way, for the first time since that supervisor's mouth shaped the word misunderstood, Annetta feels something other than helpless. 3 days later, her union rep calls. The hospital's legal team has proposed a settlement. Quiet, generous, conditional on Annetta signing a non-disclosure and resigning her position. She almost takes it. Almost. She calls her cousin Desta instead, who is a paralegal and has a mouth like a blowtorch. Desta listens to the whole thing and then says, very calmly, they tampered with the footage, didn't they? They say there are questions about the angle. Desta makes a sound that should not come from a professional woman at 11 in the morning. You need to fight this. I know. Do you have anything? Any other evidence? Annetta thinks about the phone call, about the voice that said 3 separate servers. Maybe, she says. That afternoon, she sends a text to the unknown number. Just 4 words. "I'm not signing anything." The response comes back in under a minute. "Good, don't." And then 10 seconds later, a second message. "There's a lawyer, Kim Da-eun. She's the best. Tell her Seung-jun sent you." Annetta's thumbs hover over the screen. So now she has a name. Seung-jun. She types it into a search engine with one hand while she reaches for her water bottle with the other. And then she sits very, very still. Because she recognizes the name, not from news articles, from the particular silence that surrounds it, from the way people's voices dropped when the man's business dealings came up at the community center fundraiser last spring, from the look on her colleague's face when someone mentioned the Soul Light in connection with the warehouse fire on 5th and Meridian. The man who gave her a lawyer is the most dangerous man in the city. Her hands are not quite steady when she dials Kim Da-eun's number, but she dials. Kim Da-eun is exactly what her reputation promises. A small Korean woman in her mid-40s who wears reading glasses like weapons and has a handshake that could break negotiations. She meets Annetta in a glass-walled office in a building that costs more per square foot than Annetta makes in a month, listens to the full account without interrupting, and then sits back and says, "Tell me about the footage." Annetta tells her. Da-eun's eyes sharpen. "And this person, Seung-jun, he has it secured?" "He says so." A beat. "Do you understand who he is?" "I'm beginning to." Da-eun looks at her for a long moment. Something passes across her expression, something between respect and concern. He has never, in 11 years of me knowing his name, done something like this without a reason. He said he wanted nothing. Men like him always want something. The question is whether what he wants is something you can live with. She leans forward. "But that's not my concern right now. My concern is that Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo has filed a formal complaint painting you as a dangerous, unstable employee. The footage they've released to your union shows 30 seconds with a convenient gap. Whoever got to the security team got to them fast. Can we get the original? Through legal channels? Months. Maybe never." Da-eun takes off her glasses, polishes them precisely. "Through the backup Seung-jun secured. We'd have it tomorrow. It would be admissible if we're careful about how we establish the chain of custody." She pauses. "But using his resources puts you in his orbit. You should know that going in." Annetta thinks about the parking garage, the trembling, the settlement offer designed to make her disappear quietly. "I'm already in his orbit," she says. "He chose that. I'm just deciding what to do with it." Da-eun puts her glasses back on, picks up her pen, and for the first time in the meeting, she smiles, small, precise, satisfied. "Good answer," she says. "Now let's talk about how we burn this hospital down, legally." The footage drops into the legal proceedings like a grenade on a Tuesday morning. 47 seconds. Crisp and undeniable. Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo's hand, his fingers closing in Annetta's hair, the yank, her face, the chart sliding, and around her the faces of 7 witnesses whose statements the hospital had quietly discouraged. The hospital's legal team requests an emergency continuance. The judge, a woman who has clearly been waiting years for a case exactly like this one, denies it. Social media gets hold of it by noon. By 3 p.m., Annetta's name is trending nationally. By 5 p.m., she is sitting in her cousin Desta's apartment eating jollof rice and watching news anchors debate the footage on 4 different channels while her phone receives 742 messages from people she has never met. She turns the volume down, eats her rice. You okay? Desta asks. No, Annetta says, but I will be. Her phone buzzes. She has learned in the past 2 weeks to recognize the particular rhythm of messages from that number. You handled it well, the text reads. The press conference was strong. She didn't have a press conference. Da-eun handled the statement. Annetta stood beside her and said 4 sentences and kept her face composed and did not shake. She types back. You watched it? The response, yes. She stares at the word for a moment. Then, why? The pause before his reply is longer than usual, long enough that she wonders if she's pushed into territory he won't cross. Then, I wanted to see if they'd managed to make you afraid. And they didn't, he writes. Good. She puts the phone face down on the table. Desta is watching her with the particular expression of someone who wants to ask a question and is using extreme restraint not to. Annetta meets her eyes. Don't, Annetta says. I haven't said anything. You're thinking very loudly. Desta reaches for more rice. I just want to know who's texting you in a way that makes you look like that. Like what? Like you're trying to decide whether to run towards something or away from it. Annetta picks up her fork, says nothing, which for Desta is an answer. The following week, Kim Da-eun requests a face-to-face meeting with her client and one additional party. Annetta arrives at the office to find Seung-jun already there. She has imagined this moment, has rehearsed her composure for it, has reminded herself several times of exactly what he is and what his presence in her life means and why she should stay professionally detached and personally distant. None of that survives the first 5 seconds. He stands when she walks in. Not a power move, something more instinctive than that, like a reflex his body performed before his mind could calculate the optics. He's taller than she expected from across a trauma bay, with a face that's all sharp angles and controlled expression, dark eyes that land on her, and then, for just a fraction of a second, do something she doesn't have a word for. Not assessment, not attraction exactly, more like recognition. The way you feel when something you've been searching for stops moving long enough to be seen. Then the fraction of a second ends, and he is perfectly composed again. Ms. Annetta, he says. His voice is exactly what she remembers from the phone. Low, calibrated, a slight roughness underneath the control. Mr. Han, she says. He gestures toward the chair beside his. She chooses the one across the table. Something flickers in his expression. If she didn't know better, she'd call it amusement. Da-eun doesn't waste time. The hospital is in crisis mode. 3 of the nurses who witnessed the incident have come forward with corroborating statements. Dr. Jeon's legal team is now arguing that the backup footage was obtained illegally and should be excluded from the proceedings. She looks at Seung-jun. They will try to subpoena the source. They won't find it, he says. They'll find you. Yes. He says it the way people say the sky is blue. Not threat, not bravado, just the particular calm of a man who has calculated consequences and made peace with them. Annetta watches him. He is looking at Da-eun, which means she can look at him without being caught. And she does. The line of his jaw, the careful stillness of his hands on the table, the way he sits like rooms are things that arrange themselves around him. She is a practical woman. She has always been practical. She knows the difference between powerful and safe, and she knows which one he is. She looks away. If they come for the source, she says, does that put you in legal jeopardy? Da-eun raises her eyebrows. Seung-jun turns his head. Now he is looking at her, and the full weight of it is different from what she expected. Not predatory, not calculating. Attentive. Like she is the most interesting problem in the room. "Don't worry about me," he says. "I'm not worried about you," she says. "I'm worried about whether helping me creates exposure for you that you then have to manage in ways I don't want to be responsible for." A pause. "That's a very specific concern," he says. "I'm a specific person." His eyes do the thing again, that fraction of a second thing. She catches it this time, and something in her chest pulls, not toward him, just toward something, some current she doesn't have the navigation for. "The exposure is manageable," he says, "and it was my choice to create it." "Why?" she asks. It's the same question she asked on the phone. She asks it again because she suspects the phone answer, because what happened was wrong, was true but incomplete. He holds her gaze. Something in his jaw shifts. "I was there," he says finally. "I saw it happen. I saw your face." A beat. "I don't leave things unfinished." It's not the full answer. They both know it, but Da-eun is already moving on to the next agenda item. And Annetta turns back to the papers in front of her, and whatever was in the air between them is folded away like it never happened. Except her pulse doesn't settle for the rest of the meeting, and when she glances at him once more before they leave, just once, just briefly, his eyes are already on her. The case doesn't end quietly. Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo, it turns out, has done this before. Not just the hair. Other things, smaller humiliations worn down to invisibility by the grinding machine of institutional protection. 3 nurses, 2 residents. A scrub tech who left the hospital 6 months ago and moved back to her hometown without explaining why. When Da-eun's team starts pulling threads, the whole wall starts to come down. Annetta doesn't know most of this is happening. She is on administrative leave, which means she is home, which means she is climbing the walls of her apartment, rearranging furniture and reorganizing her medical textbooks and calling her mother in Atlanta every other day to assure her that yes, she is eating, no, she is not letting them win, yes, she knows God didn't bring her this far. She starts running. Every morning at 6 a.m. through the park 2 blocks from her apartment, the kind of running that's really just controlled falling forward because the alternative is standing still, and she cannot stand still right now. He finds her on the 4th morning. She rounds the bend near the fountain, and there he is. Seung-jun, in dark jogger pants and a fitted jacket, standing at the park bench like he has always been there, like the park arranged itself around him while she wasn't looking. She stops. "Are you following me?" she asks, breathing hard. "I was told you run here in the mornings." He pauses. "I run too." "That's not an answer." "No," he says, "it isn't." And he says it so plainly, so without apology, that she doesn't know whether to be alarmed or something else, something more honest. "Why?" she asks. 3rd time she's asked him that question. He looks at her for a long moment. In the early light, without the fluorescent glare of the hospital or the formal architecture of Da-eun's conference room, he looks different. Younger by a fraction. Something less resolved in his expression, like the calculation he normally wears, slipped while he wasn't guarding it. "The hearing is in 2 weeks, he says. "There's been a development. Da-eun wanted me to tell you in person." She waits. Jeon's legal team has hired someone to find out where the backup footage came from, he says. "They think it's a disgruntled hospital employee. They're not looking at me yet, but they've also begun building a parallel case." He says the next part carefully, watching her face. "They're suggesting you fabricated the incident, that the footage was staged, that you and several colleagues conspired to damage John's reputation. The world goes slightly sideways. She has expected retaliation. She has not expected this, the audacity of turning her victimhood into conspiracy, of loading the weapon that was used on her and pointing it back at her hands. Her jaw tightens. "Okay," she says. He blinks. "Okay." "That's what I said." She starts stretching, quad stretch, calf stretch, methodical and deliberate. What do they need to make that stick? He watches her stretch. Something in his face shifts, not the fraction of a second thing this time. Something slower and more confused, like she keeps answering questions he hasn't finished asking. They'd need to discredit at least 2 of the witnesses, pressure them into changing their statements. "Have they approached anyone?" One of the orderlies received an offer, a job at a private clinic. Better pay, immediate start date. He pauses. He hasn't accepted, but he's afraid. His name? Marcus Osei. I know Marcus. She straightens up. Let me talk to him. Annetta. I'm not a child, and this isn't your case, she says. Not unkindly, just precisely. You helped me get the footage, and I'm grateful. But I'm not going to sit in my apartment while people I work with get pressured into erasing what they saw. That's not how I operate. He is quiet for a moment. She can feel the tension in him, the instinct to protect colliding with something he's still learning, which is that she doesn't need to be protected, she needs to be backed. I'll come with you, he says. That would make him more afraid, not less. He looks at her, a long, honest look that feels like it's reading something she didn't put on the surface. Fine, he says, but you tell me how it goes. Why? Because if they threaten him after your visit, I want to know immediately. She meets his eyes, holds the look. And then what? His expression does something she hasn't seen on him yet. A kind of restrained intensity, like heat behind glass. And then I handle the people doing the threatening. She should find this statement alarming. She should create some careful professional distance from this conversation and this man and the implied violence underneath his calm. Instead, what she feels is steady. For the first time in weeks, simply and completely steady. I'll text you, she says. And she runs. Marcus Osei agrees to meet her at a diner 2 neighborhoods from the hospital. He is a large man who looks like he hasn't slept in a week, and when Annetta slides into the booth across from him, he immediately starts apologizing. I haven't said yes, he tells her. I want you to know that. I haven't said anything. I know, she says. I'm not here to pressure you. I'm here to ask if you're okay. He blinks, like that's the last thing he expected. They came to my apartment, he says. Not just a phone call. They came to my apartment, with a folder, my rent history, my credit score. He stops. I have a daughter. I know. She puts her hands flat on the table. Marcus, what you saw was real. What you remember is real, and I'm not asking you to be brave on my behalf. That's not fair, and it's not what I'm doing. She meets his eyes. But I want you to know that whoever is pressuring you, they have more to lose from this case than you do. And there are people in my corner who are very good at making pressure go away. He looks at her for a long moment. Something in his expression, the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something too long, shifts. The job offer, he says slowly. It disappeared after I told my wife about it, like it evaporated. She said I imagined it. He pauses. I didn't imagine it. No, Annetta says. You didn't. She texts Seung-jun from the parking lot. Just 3 words. Someone spooked them. His response comes back in 40 seconds. Good. That was the point. She stares at her phone. He had already known about the job offer. He had already moved to make it disappear before she even met with Marcus. He had told her about it, let her make her own choice to go, while simultaneously removing the threat. The careful architecture of it lands on her all at once. He is not protecting her instead of her. He is protecting her alongside her, working in the background, removing obstacles, leaving her the visible agency while he operates in the dark. It is, she thinks, the most sophisticated kind of support she has ever received. It terrifies her. And it does something else that she isn't ready to name. 2 days before the hearing, Da-eun calls with news that reshapes the case entirely. 2 more women have come forward, former employees of Mercy General, one of whom now works in Seattle, one of whom left medicine entirely. Both have documented incidents involving Dr. Yeon that the hospital suppressed. How did you find them? Annetta asks. Da-eun pauses, the specific pause of someone choosing their words. I had some research assistants. Annetta closes her eyes briefly. He found them. He has resources. He has an empire. Yes, Da-eun says carefully. And right now it's pointed in your direction. Annetta is quiet for a moment. Outside her window, the city does its ordinary evening things. Buses, voices, the smell of someone's dinner through the neighbor's vent. She thinks about Seung-jun in the park at 6 in the morning, in Da-eun's conference room, watching her choose the chair across the table, the fraction of a second thing his eyes do every time she says something he didn't predict. She thinks about the word pointed, and what it costs to point an empire. Tell him thank you, she says. Another pause. You could tell him yourself. I know, she says. Tell him anyway. The night before the hearing, her phone rings at 11:30. She answers immediately. She has been awake anyway. You should sleep, he says. So should you. I don't sleep much. He says it the way people say things that are true and also cost something to say. She settles back against her headboard. The apartment is dark except for the light above the stove, which she always leaves on. The city hums outside. What time is it where you are? Same time I'm nearby. Something shifts in her chest. Not alarming, actually the opposite. Why are you nearby? A pause. Honest again, like he calculates his pauses the way other people calculate their words. Because the hearing is tomorrow and John's team has been unpredictable and I wanted to be... He stops. Available, she supplies. Yes. She doesn't push further. Neither does he. They stay on the line for a moment in the particular silence of 2 people who have somehow built a thing between them, careful and strange and real, without ever deciding to. Are you afraid? He asks. Of the hearing. Of any of it. She considers the question seriously, because he asked it seriously. I'm afraid of what happens if we win and people act like it's over. Like one case in one hospital fixes what it represents. She pauses. And I'm afraid of what happens if we lose. And I have to figure out what I'm worth in a world that just told me I'm not worth the truth. The silence on his end is different now, weighted. You're worth considerably more than the truth, he says quietly. The truth is just where we're starting. She closes her eyes, presses her phone against her ear and stays very still, because something in those words just landed in her chest like something she'd been waiting a long time to hear and hadn't known it until this moment. Seung-jun, she says. First time she's used his name like that. Deliberate. The intimacy of it surprises even her. "Yes," he says, and the way he says it, low and careful, like he felt the intimacy of it too, tells her everything. "Don't come into the courtroom tomorrow," she says. "I need to do this part on my own." A beat. "I know, but," she breathes, "stay nearby." "I already am," he says. She sleeps. The hearing is 4 hours long and Annetta is there for all of it, sitting beside Da-eun in a charcoal blazer she bought specifically because she wanted to feel like armor, her hands still on the table, her face composed in the careful blankness that strong women learn early because the world punishes visible feeling, Marcus Osei testifies. His voice shakes at first and then steadies. The two women Da-eun found, one appearing via video from Seattle, give their statements. The footage plays on a screen, 47 undeniable seconds. Dr. Jeon's lawyer is skilled and aggressive and has clearly been expensive. He attacks chain of custody. He attacks motivation. He uses the word vendetta 3 times. And then Da-eun stands up. And 30 years of doing this with precision and contempt for inefficiency takes the floor. She doesn't raise her voice once. She doesn't need to. By the time she is finished, the hearing officer's face has the particular stillness of a person choosing between their conscience and their comfort, and choosing, slowly, the former. The interim ruling. Annetta is reinstated, effective immediately. Dr. Jeon is placed on suspension pending full investigation. The hospital is cited for evidence tampering. It's not everything. It won't fix what it represents, just like she said last night on the phone, but it's real, and it's documented, and it's hers. In the corridor outside the hearing room, while Da-eun speaks to reporters and Desta hugs her hard enough to realign her spine, Annetta's phone buzzes. I watched the live stream on Da-eun's feed. She types, "I told you not to come in. I wasn't inside. Where were you?" The response is a location pin. The coffee shop directly across the street. She looks up. Through the glass courthouse doors, across 4 lanes of traffic, she can see the coffee shop's large front window. She can see, if she squints past the glare, a figure standing at the window, phone in hand, looking back. She lifts her hand. Across the street, barely visible through distance and glass, he raises his. Desta follows her gaze. Squints. "Who's that?" "Complicated," Annetta says. "He's been there the whole time." She thinks about stay nearby, about 11:30 p.m. and a phone call, and you're worth considerably more than the truth. "Yes," she says. "He has." She goes to him. Not immediately. She gives interviews. She speaks carefully and specifically about what the case represents and what still needs to change. She lets Da-eun steer the narrative with the precision of a master. She hugs Marcus Osei and means it. She does all of that. And then she crosses the street. The coffee shop is warm and slightly too loud. He's at a corner table, a cup of something untouched in front of him, and he stands again when he sees her, the same reflex, and this time it makes something in her soften instead of stiffen. She sits down across from him. Neither of them says anything for a moment. The noise of the shop wraps around them like cover. "You did it," he says. "We did it," she says. "Don't be modest. It's less becoming than everything else about you." Something crosses his face, warm and surprised and quickly managed, like he's not accustomed to being teased. It changes him entirely just for a second, makes him look like someone who knows how to be happy but forgot. "Thank you," she says, quietly, meaning it completely. He shakes his head slightly. "You would have found another way." "Maybe, but this way was better." She looks at him, really looks, the way she hasn't let herself look, because every time she does, the current gets stronger, and she is a practical woman. What happens now? For you? What do you mean? You pulled resources, you moved people around, you spent attention and time and whatever currency you operate in on my case. She keeps her voice even. That has to land somewhere. There's a cost. His hands are on the table. She notices them. Surgeon's hands almost, except a surgeon's hands save, and his have done other things. Things she doesn't ask about because she isn't ready for those answers. Strong. Still. There's always a cost, he says. I chose the cost. Why? Fourth time. She always comes back to this question with him. This time, he doesn't give her the half answer or the honest but incomplete deflection. This time, he looks at her steadily across the small table in the noisy coffee shop with the afternoon light cutting in at an angle that catches the dark of his eyes, and he says, "Because I saw you in that hospital, and I saw what they did to you, and I saw how you held yourself afterward, how you refused, and something happened in me that I can't explain with the language I have." He stops. His jaw shifts. I've been practical my whole life. I've run on logic and leverage and necessity. And then you were there, and I was none of those things for a moment, and I haven't been entirely those things since. The room is loud around them. Under the table, her hands have gone very still. You should know, she says carefully, that I'm aware of what you are, what you do. I know you are. And I haven't decided what I think about it. I know that too. A beat. I'm not asking you to decide tonight. She looks at him for a long moment. The current is strong. It has been building since a parking garage and a phone call and a park bench at 6 in the morning and 11:30 at night with a city humming outside. It would be easy to let it pull her somewhere she hasn't mapped. She is a practical woman. She is also, right now, sitting across from a man who stayed across the street for 4 hours because she asked him to stay nearby. Dinner, she says. Not tonight. Not as a thank you. She holds his gaze. As something I want. He is quiet for a moment. The expression on his face does something new. Something she doesn't have a name for but recognizes. The way you recognize a feeling you've never felt before because your body has been waiting for it. Yes, he says. Simply, completely. Dinner is a week later at a restaurant she chooses. Not expensive, not a statement, just good food in a warm room where nobody will perform for them. He arrives exactly on time, in dark clothes that say civilian but can't quite hide what he is underneath. He pulls out her chair. She lets him. They order. The wine is good. The conversation moves like something that was always going to move this way, inevitable and easy. He tells her things he doesn't tell people. Not secrets, not yet. Just the real shape of himself under the architecture. That he came to this country at 19 with nothing that mattered. That he built his empire not from ambition exactly, but from the specific fury of watching people who looked like him be stepped on by people who assumed they could. That there is a version of what he does that he can justify, and versions he can't, and he stopped pretending he didn't know the difference a long time ago. She listens. She is good at listening. It's in the marrow of nursing, the ability to hear what people mean under what they say. What she hears under Han Seung-jun is a man who has been alone in his power for a very long time. She tells him about her mother's hospital in Atlanta, where she watched nurses be invisible while the work they did kept people alive. About choosing this career as a form of argument, I see you matter, I'll stay. About the particular exhaustion of being strong in spaces that reward your strength with higher expectations and zero grace. He listens to her the way she listens to him, like every word is a door he doesn't want to miss. They close the restaurant. In the street after the city cool and lit around them, he walks close without touching. She is aware of the proximity, the warmth of him, the careful restraint. She stops at the corner and turns, and he's right there, closer than she expected, and neither of them moves. I should tell you, she says, voice low, that I don't make decisions like this quickly. Like what? Whatever this is. She gestures between them. The inadequacy of the gesture makes her almost smile. I'm careful. I've always been careful. I know, he says, and you're the opposite of everything I've been careful about. I know that too. His voice has dropped. The restraint is doing something visible in his jaw, in the stillness of his hands at his sides. I'm not asking you to stop being careful. Then what are you asking? He looks at her, the fraction of a second thing, and then longer, and then he says, let me be worth the risk. It is the right thing to say, which tells her something about him, that he has learned somehow the architecture of her without her teaching it explicitly. She reaches up and puts her hand against his jaw. Just that. Just her palm against the sharp line of his face, warm skin and the slight roughness of the hour, and she feels the way his breath changes. A single deep inhale, controlled and barely managed, the most honest thing she has seen from him yet. Earn it, she says. He turns his face slightly into her hand, presses his lips to her palm, brief and certain and devastating. She lets him drive her home. He earns it. Not by grand gestures alone, though there are those. The security detail she doesn't notice for 3 weeks until Desta points out that the same black car is always a block from wherever she is. The package that arrives at her apartment containing a first edition of a medical ethics textbook she mentioned once in passing wanting. The way he shows up at the hospital on her first day back, not to escort her in, but just to stand outside on the street, visible, in case the building tries to swallow her again. He earns it in smaller ways too, by asking questions and waiting for the full answer, by not flinching when she pushes back, by learning, slowly and visibly, that protecting her and controlling her are not the same thing, and choosing the former. There is a night, 3 weeks later, when she is at his apartment, a place that is all dark surfaces and clean lines, and she notices a very careful absence of anything personal, like a man who never quite let himself arrive somewhere. When the careful restraint of weeks collapses in the space of a single moment, she is standing at his window looking at the city still in her coat, and he comes to stand beside her, and she turns, and the distance between them is nothing. And they have both been practicing the language of this for long enough that when it finally happens, it doesn't feel like breaking anything. It feels like arriving. He is gentle in a way that surprises her, focused in a way that doesn't. His hands in her hair, careful, asking the absolute opposite of what she last experienced. And she feels the difference in her whole body, the distinction between being handled and being held. The city blurs beyond the window. She does not need the details written to know what it means. She knows when something changes the shape of a person. Afterward, in the quiet, she lies against his chest and feels his heartbeat. Too fast, still, unguarded. And something settles in her that has been unsettled for a long time. I'm still not done being afraid of this, she says to the ceiling. I know, he says into her hair. neither am I. She finds this more comforting than if he'd promised not to frighten her. The case concludes 6 weeks later. Dr. Jeon Kwan-soo's medical license is suspended for 2 years pending review. The hospital's board settles with Annetta for a number that is meaningful and private, with a public apology that Da-eun negotiated word by word. 3 of the 6 board members who attempted to suppress the footage quietly resign over the following month. The scrub tech in her hometown is called and heard and believed. None of it is everything. Annetta says this clearly in the interview that runs nationally, sitting straight, hands still, voice unhurried. And then she says the rest of it, the part about what still needs to change and who is still invisible in these halls and what her return to Mercy General will mean and won't mean. She says it carefully and specifically and without asking permission. Seung-jun watches the interview from a hotel room in Seoul, where he is managing something that required his physical presence, and which he is now managing faster than he has ever managed anything because he wants to be back in 4 days instead of 7. He texts her, "You're extraordinary." She texts back, "You're biased." "Completely," he responds. "Come to Seoul with me when this is done." A pause. Then, "Ask me again when you're home." He is home in 3 days. He asks her in the airport before he's even out of the arrivals hall, which is not how he planned it. He had something more considered in mind, something that matched the way she moved through the world, measured and true. But then he sees her standing just past the barrier in a yellow dress with her hair loose for once, and all the measured planning evaporates. "Come to Seoul with me," he says, right there. The noise and movement of an international terminal around them. She laughs, the real laugh, the one that breaks out of her entirely without permission, the one he has been cataloguing since the pediatric bay at 2 a.m. "You asked me already. You said ask again when I'm home. You've been home for approximately 45 seconds. "Yes." He steps closer, crowds moving past them, ordinary and oblivious. "Annetta." Just her name. But the way he says it, like a thing he came back for. She looks at him, all the current, all the months of it present in the space between them. "Seoul," she says. "Yes, but..." She holds up one finger. "We negotiate everything else." His expression breaks open. That thing she hasn't seen enough of, the warmth under the architecture. "Everything," he agrees. He takes her hand. She lets him, and in the middle of an airport, in front of no one in particular and everyone in general, he lifts her hand to his mouth the way he did on a street corner months ago. Press of lips to her knuckles, certain and unhurried. And the city, and the world and all of it, arranges itself around them like it was always going to. 6 months later, in a room overlooking the Han River with their families present and Da-eun crying in the front row and Desta loudly critiquing the floral arrangements, Annetta signs her name next to his on a document that is simple and permanent and true. He finds her at the window afterward, always the window, always the city, and stands behind her, his arms around her, his chin against her temple, and for a long moment they are just still. "You know," she says, "this started because someone pulled my hair." "No," he says, "it started because you didn't let them win." She turns in his arms, looks at him with the particular clarity of a woman who has earned every inch of where she's standing. "We," she says. He smiles, wide and real and entirely his. "We." And outside, the city holds all its ordinary noise and crisis and life. And inside, between two people who found each other in the wreckage of someone else's cruelty, something permanent and impossible and entirely theirs breathes on. The end.